Okay, so I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Aryeh Gotfryd. Dr. Aryeh Gotfryd is, again, he's a friend of mine and been a lecturer various times since the early years of our conferences in the 1990s. He is an environmental scientist associated with the University of Toronto, and he's going to speak in English about in the name of Mashiach and science in general. He's a great intellectual and has helped Professor Branover in translations of some of his Branover's books, like recently the book has been published, Mind Over Matter. Okay, this is the Rebbe Menachem Sheikh's letters on Torah and science in general. Based on a book compiled earlier by Professor Branover in Hebrew, and Dr. Gotfryd got it translated and with Hosafos, expanded on it and in English. So again, Toronto, Canada, and then we'll go back to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, Dr. Aryeh Gotfryd. Bring up the share. That's done. And this is going to share.
Rabbi Isai, I would like to start with a proclamation. Yechi Adonenu, Moreinu v'Rabbeinu, Melech HaMashiach le'olam v'oed. I want to wish a great and a hearty Yasher Koyach to Reb Shimon Silman for organizing this event, for inviting me, giving me the privilege to participate in this auspicious event at this auspicious time of Yod Gimel Iyar, and for his work and commitment to the Rebbe's Inyanim, to the Rial Institute, Reb Yisrael Aryeh Leib Institute for Mashiach and Science, which has been going on for many years, and the privilege of working with him on many of those occasions has been a very special schus for me, and I'm glad we're participating together with all those who are connecting remotely. And soon we'll connect together in reality in the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi with Mashiach Tzidkenu. The whole concept of Mashiach and science is kind of bizarre when you think about it. What is science? Science is Welt. What is Mashiach? Mashiach is Elokus. Welt on one side, Elokus on the other side. Science is Seichel. Seichel is cold. Mashiach is fire, enthusiasm, it's warmth. Seichel, ultimately, there is nothing more dead than the Seichel, natural Seichel. Seichel in Inyanim Tiviyim is, as the Rebbe puts it in a Yom Yom, Nisa. But Baruch Hashem, there's a thing called Tchiyas HaMeisim. Mashiach is Tchiyas HaMeisim. So really, Mashiach and science, Be'etzem, is cholent and borscht. It seems to not make sense to put it together. The Tanya, I believe it's in Perek Ches, goes into great lengths to discuss what is Chochmas Olam, Chochmas Chetzenius. Chochmas Chetzenius is Metame Chochmas Shabanefesh. Unlike other Averas will contaminate the Levushim, Machshava, Dibur, Maaseh, they contaminate the Midas, all kinds of Averas contaminating all kinds of things. But it takes something really special, like science, to be Metame Chochma Shabanefesh. What do I have within me that's more valuable than Chochma Shabanefesh? That's my download of Elokus. That's the ability of the Raya Mehemna to feed me the faith in my Seichel. so that I can transfer my midas, so that I can become a mensch, I can go through my spheres of Eimer and become a little bit better person for Kabbalah's Torah, and ultimately for Kabbalah's Teirasei Shel Mashiach. So now I want to celebrate science. It seems very strange. But stranger things have happened. If we rewind history back to Gan Eden, we're going to find that in Gan Eden, everything started, all the problems started with the Nachash. Nachash, Bigematria, Mashiach. The very worst enemies become the very greatest allies. We know this from the Rebbe, we know this from the Alter Rebbe. Transformation is our game. Ishapcha, Iskafia and Ishapcha, we're taking Lamai Adin Kates to Lamata Mata Adin Tachlis, and you can hardly find a mimer that's not about this Inyan. So let me tell a story. It's a published story. It was, I think, in the Chafs, that an entourage came late at night, not on a regular Yechidus night, and they came to 770, black limousines, many armed snipers come out of one or more vehicles, take positions around 770, ready for whatever might happen. And then from the other limousine, a group of distinguished-looking gentlemen come out, some carrying briefcases, filing in briskly into 770 late at night, and they come into Gan Eden Elyon, and they stay there for some time. The people that are around, it's quite a commotion. What's going on? Soon, or after some time, they file out and they leave. They get into the limo, the armed snipers get into their limos, and they speed off into the night. Who's there? Reuven Dunin. Reuven Dunin had special privileges, special access to the Rebbe when he wanted. He came into the Rebbe because he wanted to know, who are these people, what is going on? He asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him that they came from the Department of Defense, from the American military apparatus. He said, what did they want? They had questions about nuclear energy. Rebbe, I hope you didn't tell them anything. He said, I did. He says, why did you help them? Nuclear energy is very bad. So the Rebbe told him that there's three reasons why he helped him. That the first reason is this country sheltered my father-in-law, the Rebbe, when he came here. And for that alone, I owe them a debt of gratitude to do whatever I can to serve it for the benefit of this country. The second reason is the nuclear energy is not a bad thing. Nuclear energy, like a knife, it can be used to hurt or it can be used to cut food. Nuclear energy can have tremendous benefit. It can also be tremendously destructive. And the third reason that I help them is, don't know exactly the Lashon, but as I remember, Ze sollen wissen, wer seinen mir. And the Rebbe pointed at his holy self. So regarding this middle idea, what science can be used for, the Rebbe discusses this in a number of sichas and maimarim, but a particular sicha, which is a template sicha, different than the mishpatim non base that Rabbi Dr. Silman likes to always point out. But the second Noach in Chelik Tesvav of Lekutei Sichos, Parshas Noach, it's talking about Torah and science there very specifically, that when the flood happened, it was the windows of heaven and the fountains of the deep. The Rebbe, quoting the Ashmaris Abayker, is talking about the windows of heaven being Pnimius Torah and the fountains of the deep being basing this on what the Zohar says, that the Zohar said it's upper wisdom and lower wisdom, and a Kabbalistic sefer the Rebbe brings down says the upper wisdom is Chassid. The Rebbe points out the upper wisdom is Chassidus, and the Yishmar Tzedek is telling you that the lower wisdom is the knowledge of science, and that these things come up in the 6th century of the 6th millennium in order to make tikkun in the world and prepare it for the 7th millennium for Geula. So the Rebbe is asking, obviously Pnimius Torah coming out in the 1840s, the times of the Tzemach Tzedek, Alter Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek, the publishing of Torah Aryeh Gotfryd, that you could say that's talking about God and the soul and the purpose of life and the inner meanings and the things that have to pave the way for our God consciousness so we'll be ready for Geula. But what science can help? And the Rebbe gives a few ways in which science helps to pave the way for Geula. He gives an example of radio waves. He says that that they can first of all be used for the purpose of spreading Torah and the purpose of empowering mitzvahs. For example, that Tanya was being taught on the radio. This is the developments of science in the service of Torah and Hafatzas Hamayanas Chutza. The second aspect is that it gives us mesholim and interpretations, a way to analogize and understand inyonim of Elokus. For example, the idea that there is an eye that hears, eye that sees, and an ear that hears. So the radio waves allow, because what's being said over here is being transmitted over there. I'm sitting here in Thornhill, Canada. You're in Eretz Yisrael, and you're in California, and you're in New York, and you're in somewhere else. And the whole idea that there's an ear that hears remotely what's being said over here now was at that time a chiddush, and that chiddush gave us an idea of things we learned from Torah. But when the animal soul hears it, when you can physically experience it, now the meaning becomes even greater. The third level that the Rebbe alludes to, doesn't go in any depth in that sikha, is that the inyonim of science themselves are an expression of very deep concepts, of godly concepts. And there's a godliness in the understanding of nature's working, because God himself, Elokim b'gematria hateva, God himself is invested in those natural laws. So we're understanding nature, we're understanding the mind of God, understanding Yonim of science in order to understand Mi she'amar v'haya ha'elam. So science can be very useful, and I want to explore a little bit of that aspect of science. When I was preparing for this, I was asked by someone, according to science, can our thoughts affect physical objects in our environment? It was a great question. I thought, you know what, don't bother me. I'm preparing a talk about Mashiach and science. Don't ask me if thoughts can affect physical objects in our environment. Maybe it can, maybe it can't. And it started to work on me. By Hashgacha Pratis, I was asked this question. I couldn't have been asked a better question. The question on a deeper level, especially knowing who was asking, is, can our attitude create Geula? Is Geula a function? The Rebbe said, open your eyes, see the reality unfolding. See Mashiach is at the table with us right now. See the things that are the neflois. Open your eyes, the nisim and the neflois that are right in front of you. So that, our attitude, and also learning in Yonim Mashiach and Geula, the way they are in Torah, the Rebbe is telling us very clearly, this is the Derech Yashar, this is the way to actualize Geula. Learn it, think it, perceive it, it'll tracht gut, wird sein gut. This is an inyan of emunah. But is this an inyan of seichel? Can tracht gut bet sein gut, can that be found in science? According to science, can our thoughts affect physical objects? Can it affect our environment? Can it affect remotely? How does this actually work? So, in the way of mipsari echsa elokah, from my flesh I'll see God, I will try to give you a few pearls, things that I found inspiring, and I hope you'll also. In one of my previous professions, I was facilitating intercountry adoption from Russia to Canada. Hundreds of orphans, one by one, that went from Russian orphanages were placed in Canadian families. So I had an assistant, a Latvian non-Jewish woman whose name was Lydia. We had, at that time, we had two families going to Moscow district, each going to a different orphanage at around the same time, each adopting a different child, but around the same age, boys around a year and a half, and similar socioeconomic background, similar setup for what they would have to deal with, dealing with the same regional government of Moscow and the same Canadian authorities. And Lydia said, watch what happens with these families, our clients. This family has a bad attitude. They're going to have bad experiences. This family has a good attitude. They're going to have great experience. And their whole experience is going to be different because their attitudes are different. I said, Lydia, what are you looking at these poor people with a bad eye? They're going to have a bad experience. She says, no, that's how it works. I said, maybe they'll interpret experiences differently and that'll affect them and they will take it differently and that'll be the difference. She says, no, Dr. Gotfryd, you don't understand how the world works. According to your attitude, that is how the objective events of your life unfold. I said, Lydia, of course, I've studied ideas like this, but this is how you see life? She says, this is obvious. Wait and see. So I thought, okay, I'm a little bit of a scientist. It's an experiment. What's going to happen? Sure enough, the couple doesn't have to be like this. It can be the opposite, but here's how it played out. The couple with a bad attitude, they had difficulty at the orphanage, they had difficulty with the child, they had difficulty with the medical clearances, they had difficulty in the court, they had difficulty in their hotel, they had difficulty with their flight. Many of these things had nothing to do on an obvious level with their attitude. Whereas everything with the other family was like a hot knife through butter. They were done in record time. Everything was smooth and they came home and happy. Fantastic. Tracht gut, wird sein gut. I've heard it somewhere before. We've all heard it somewhere before. But when you see it happening, you feel it a little differently. Let me take it out of a tiny context and make it in a slightly larger context. There is a doctor, a medical doctor in the United States by the name of John Sarno. He wrote a number of books, one of which is called Healing Back Pain. A lot of people have chronic pain, back pain, knee pain. These are interesting things. And he happened to be an expert in this field for many decades. And he developed a theory of mind-based medicine regarding back pain and how it works. A very radical theory. He went quite against a lot of medical dogma, and yet he was not trashed by his peers. He was not trashed by the journals. Wikipedia has a very balanced and respectable page about him, and no matter how radical he was, because he was such a great doctor with such a great pedigree and such great experience, it was seichel, but it was at a very high level. What did he teach? He said, imagine that you have chronic pain. You have back pain. Is it your slip disc? Well, it's very interesting. If you take a look, there are many people with slip discs that don't have pain, and there are many people with pain that don't have slip discs. So the correlation is far from one-to-one. What's really going on with back pain? So he started analyzing this, and he noticed a number of things. And he taught basically as follows: fast forward. If you experience a flare-up of chronic pain, stop and think for a moment, what happened now or recently that my emotional state changed? I must have had a trigger event or a trigger thought that made me feel bad. Because when I feel bad, my brain, in my amygdala and my thalamus, I will emit cortisol, and I will produce adrenaline, and it's not going to be fight or flight, but it's going to create tension and pressure. That will create anoxic conditions in my joints, reduce the oxygen levels in my joints. That will promote inflammation, and the inflammation will be the cause of my pain. It happens very fast. And all you need to do to start to reduce and even eliminate chronic pain in a large percentage of cases is to be aware. Just know that you had a trigger thought and you started an inflammation reaction. Once you know you had a trigger thought, you might not even know what enraged you and what frustrated you and how it was based and who dropped you on your head as a baby. You're maybe blind to all those realities. But once you know that there is an emotional cause that puts you in a different state of mind, it removes the emotional stress, and that boosts the oxygen level in the joints, and it takes away the pain. I have seen this work practically, personally, and work for years and years, reversing chronic pain. Very interesting. Tracht gut, wird sein gut. Tracht, even not good. Just don't tracht bad. It's already a plus. There is an institute in Harvard University of Mind-Body Institute. I remember when they first founded it, it was 20 years ago or more. They said that back in those times that more than 2/3 of visits to family physicians are mind-based problems. If a person feels ill, it's a mentality thing. Controlling the mentality is going to control yourself. But what about controlling things outside of you? So for this, I have another story. A medical doctor, a friend of mine by the name of Brian Dressler, when he was an undergraduate pre-med still, he made a little spare cash by participating in a psychological research experiment. It was called Friends Research, where if you were close friends with somebody, you did the research together. One person would be watching a video of open heart surgery. The other person didn't know what video is being watched. In fact, they're in a Faraday chamber, a room which is electromagnetically shielded from any radiation. No radio waves could go in there, no magnetic waves, no signals were coming in. The room was padded, the room was quiet. It was at the far other end of that large building where the psychological research took place. And simultaneously, this person is in a reclining chair, and the lights are dimmed, and she's got half ping pong balls over her eyes, so she only sees white, and just sitting comfortably, hearing nothing, seeing nothing. All there is a little galvanic skin response electrode resting on her skin, like a lie detector type of thing. Are you schwitzing a little bit now? How much are you schwitzing? And time is going by. Half an hour, she doesn't know what's going on with her friend. Her friend is watching open heart surgery. He's trying to convey his feelings to his friend. How does that work? Well, you just try and think about your friend and share your feelings with your friend as you're watching this video. Comes to the point where they're talking about open heart surgery, so it wasn't so emotional. But when they actually made the incision and they spread apart the chest cavity and they raise the heart out of the body and it's pumping and you see all of the gore, and then he starts manipulating that heart, well, you can be sure that the average person is going to have an emotional reaction to seeing this video. It's going to be distressing to them. They're not experienced heart surgeons. They're just undergraduate students. And it turns out that in the vast majority of cases, exactly at the time when the incision and the active surgery is going on, that's the time when the galvanic skin response of the friend in a far removed area is having some excitement. Why do I mention this? Because, as we learn in Likutei Diburim and many other places, machshava is poil. Not only is machshava poil on you, machshava is poil on somebody else. As Friedrich Rebbe writes, you look at somebody, they turn around. Yeah, it's true. But there's more to it. We can affect each other. These types of experiments were not invented randomly. These types of experiments were made possible because of a huge shift in science that took place b'dafka in the Rebbe's lifetime. Of course, still the Rebbe's lifetime, but we're talking about in the 20th century. Classical physics, the kind of physics where tell me the particles and the forces, I'll tell you everything that'll happen till the end of time. I don't need a God, I don't need a soul. Don't tell me human beings have a purpose of life. That was the science that was the enemy of Emunah. That was the age of enlightenment, the dark age of the Maskilim, and all the historical reasons why it went that direction. Science ba'etzem isn't bad, but they used science for a denial of God, a denial of Ruchnius, the denial of Tachlis of the human species and of the individual. People became unimportant, life became meaningless, and of course anti-religious. This quantum theory, this new physics that emerged in the 20th century, had many irrational, supra-rational things about it, that nature was behaving in a way that's beyond nature. It wasn't a billiard ball universe. There were, call them magical properties that frustrated the rationalist mind to no end. Problems that could not be solved by reason, still cannot be solved, and is known to be unsolvable by a rational process. And yet, these laws of nature are true. I have a book that I acquired long ago, returned to me recently, a big fat book, results of 30 years of research at Princeton University by the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Project, PEAR, P-E-A-R, by John and Dunn, J-A-H-N, I believe is his name, the dean of either physics or it was engineering department, and his research associate, Brenda Dunn, I believe her name was. They assembled a collection, a report on all this research. Besides their report, they published in peer-reviewed journals things that you would expect in a fantasy. Even today, scientists, many of them have trouble just simply to accept these things. And yet, it's done with the scientific method, showing that consciousness creates reality, can even affect physical objects in experimental situations, in replicable experiments. Remarkable. Let me quote one more of this ilk. It's a whole body of literature. Nothing less than the British Medical Journal in the December of 2001. It's not the only study like this, but it's one that I read about remote retroactive intercessory prayer. What does that mean? They had approximately 3,300 heart patients that they studied. These patients were already admitted, they were already treated, they already had their health outcomes. This, how long they stayed in the hospital, how quickly they got better, if they got worse, if they died, whatever happened to them, happened to them. They divided this group randomly. This is a random, controlled, blind trial. They divided the group randomly into two groups. One group they prayed for 4 to 6 years after this hospital admission. They davened for them, essentially a prayer of Refuah Shlema U'Krova. That was the basic idea of the prayer, for a specific person's name. People enlisted for the prayer project. They didn't know who they were praying for. They only prayed for a certain person of a certain name with a heart condition. They didn't know the details. That's the only detail they knew. The other group were not prayed for by this particular prayer group. What was the results? Highly statistical significance. Well, and one variable statistical significance of 0.04, the other one 0.01. Very statistically significant that the group that was prayed for retroactively had shorter stays and got better, and shorter stays and got better quicker. What's that all about? How can something I do today affect what's going to be before? Well, in Torah terms, this is not so hard to understand. Why do the Jews today have a schus to get out of Mitzrayim? Because later they're going to be at Har Sinai, they're going to accept the Torah. So the schus of later is accounting for them now. Things that happen in the future are going to affect what happens in the past. And it's not only in Tanakh, we find it in the Gemara, this whole idea of a Torah time machine, that things that are happening in the future affect the past, and then that affects the present. And time is a stretchy thing. It's not like past, present, and future in blocks like we used to think in the classical physics. Time is a stretchy concept, and it's an all-inclusive concept. And things can jump across space without going between the spaces between. Things, according to quantum physics, can jump in time, and things can have opposite properties that don't fit together, and they fit together. Nimna ha-nimnois, impossibilities are impossible, but they happen. So I want to give an example in quantum physics, and I want to give an example in Yiddishkeit, and see how that connects with Mashiach. In quantum physics, one of the what you're dealing with is very small things that are so submicroscopic you can't exactly see them with a microscope. They're the size of the photon, the smallest particle of light, the size of an electron, the smallest unit of energy, the size of a proton or a neutron, the nucleus. Things that are smaller than an atom is the field of quantum physics. Now, this is not just theoretical. Our GPSs and our cell phones and our medical technologies are all working on now computers are working on a quantum physical basis. But the science was completely bizarre when discovered, and it was a revolution that took decades to settle. So, what is this property I want to discuss is wave-particle duality. An electron can be observed as a wave, so it's like an energy distribution. It's like a cloud of presence. You cannot say exactly where it is, but it's around, it's here. It's got a field. That's the electron as a wave. The electron, and it's just sort of radiating out. If you block it, it'll behave like a wave, like a water wave, and it'll have its ups and downs like a wave. Or you can observe the electron as a particle, in which case it has a mass, it has a velocity, it's going somewhere, it's doing something. If you choose to observe it as a particle, it's not a wave. If you choose to observe it as a wave, it's a wave and not a particle. Practically speaking, the same electron cannot be actualized as both. Cannot be. So what is it? Is it a wave or a particle? Before you observe it, potentially it's both. Actually, it's one, or in observation, it's one or the other. And actually, what is it really? It's something beyond both wave and particle. We can't really describe what it really is. So that's a very interesting kind of a thing. It leads us to many interesting conclusions about nature and about Yiddishkeit. I want to point out one parallel specifically. We have a place called the Makom Ha'aron. As the Mishnah says, Makom Ha'aron Eina Mina Mida. The place of the Aron Kodesh in the Beis HaMikdash or in the Mishkan was dimensionless space. It took up space and it didn't take up space. How? As is well known, it was 2.5 amas wide. So in the Mishkan, which was 10 amas wide in the Kodesh Kedoshim, if you measured from one side of the Aron to the wall, so that was 5 amas. From the other side of the Aron to the other wall, was also 5 amas. So, but the Aron itself was 2.5. 5 and 5 and 2.5 is 12.5. But it's not 12.5 wide. When you measured the Aron, it was 10. When you measured the Kodesh Kedoshim, it was 10 amas. When you measured each part, it added up to 12.5 because the Aron did take up space. So does the Aron take up space or it doesn't take up space? What is it really? Is it taking up space or not? So the answer seems to be, it depends on how you look at it. In observation, it either is taking space or it's not taking space. If it's not taking space, then we cannot say that it is. And if it is taking space, we cannot say that it's not. Before I observe it, we can talk about it like we're talking about it now. It's potentially either. What is it actually? It's a Gilui Elokus. This is the place where God decided to show Nimna HaNimnois, the impossibility of things that are impossible. That's really what God is all about. Gilui Etzem. That's what Mashiach is all about. What is Mashiach? Atzmis Meluvish Beguf. What is Gila? It's a Gilui Elokus, which is higher than Seder Ishtaushelis, in its Seder Ishtaushelis, that Soiviv, much beyond Soiviv, that Soiviv can be revealed and be Meluvish in Memali, and we are not going to be blown away. Atzmis, which is higher than Soiviv and Memali, will be revealed, and we will still exist. How could we exist? In the face of that, Einad Milvade. Okay, Nichanami, Einad Milvade, and we're also here. This is the Geula that we're looking to. So what does that actually do for us? What it does for us is it tells us the whole fabric of nature, the whole universe is comprised of these little electrons and protons and photons. They're not somewhere else. They're wherever you are, they are. And whatever you're made of, you're made out of those. They're all subject to coming into being with a co-creation with yourself. The way you look at, because your structure is comprised of these entities, how you reflect on who you are and what you are is up to you. So you look at yourself as entering Geula, you visualize Geula, you look at yourself as a Shnersonsky, as an expression of Rebbe, and now you're a Chosid. See yourself as a Chosid, you'll be a Chosid. You see yourself as, oy vey, there's this going on in the world, and there's that going on in the world. I'm powerless, I'm hopeless, I have no impact, I have no relevance, I can't anymore. That's an option. You either opt out or you opt in. If you opt in to Gilui Etzem, these are irreversible advances in science. I chose one. But the sciences are moving inexorably to Geula. You could look in mathematics, and you could look in physics, you could look in chemistry, you could look in genetics, you could look at ecology, you could look at environment, you could look at society, the geopolitical. Any area you look, you'll see the stream is flowing. We're moving into a Geula era. The only friction is, what's between the temples? What's between these temples? So we need to actualize the Mashiach inside, and then we're going to see La'alta L'Geula V'hinei Zeh Mashiach Ba Kfar Ba Mashiach, the Rebbe Melech Mashiach here and now with us, connecting with us, taking us out of Golus in the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. Yechia Adonenu, Bareinu Rabbeinu, Melech Mashiach, Le'olam Vod.
Okay, that was some speech. I'd like to pick up on a few things that Dr. Gotfryd said, because these are things that we've been talking about. First of all, the example he said about people praying for someone who's sick had an effect on, not only had an effect on them, but had a retroactive effect on them. So I'd like to mention once again, our friend and colleague, Professor Yomio Branover, has been sick, a long time, years. And I mentioned his condition at the beginning of the conference. And I want to say once again, we should all have him in mind. If we're zocha these days to be able to daven with a minyan, say a mishaberet for him, Yirmiyahu ben Devora. In any case, wherever we are, however we daven, we sang in Shmoneh Esrei for Ein Hashem v'nei Rafei, Hosheinu v'nei Roshea, Baruch Atah Hashem Rafei Cholei Amor Yisrael. Please have him in mind. Yirmiyahu ben Devora should have a refuah shalema. Very precious neshama. Yiraton. They should also have a very precious and healthy goof, physically and spiritually well, healthy and well and strong. The other thing is Dr. Gotfryd referred to the Sikha from many years ago of Parshas Noach, where Rabbi Menachem Shech talks about the Zohar that says that in the 600th year of the 6th millennium, there's going to be a flood, parallel to the flood in the time of Noach. The pasuk in Parshas Noach says, in the 600th year of the life of Noach, the windows of heaven opened up, the fountains below broke open, and water came from everywhere, a flood. But this flood, the Zohar says, is the flood of knowledge. The heavens will open up in the 600th year of the 6th millennium, which is the secular year 1840. And wisdom will come down from above, which Rabbi Menachem Shech explains. This is a publication and the Hafotza, beginning with the Hafotza of the Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe, Likutei Torah and Torah Or. Wisdom will come down from above and wisdom will come up from below. The fountains of wisdom below will break open. And that is the Chiddush, that the wisdom from below is the sciences. And the Zohar concludes by saying that these two developments, the wisdom coming down from above and the wisdom coming up from below, are a preparation for Yemos HaMashiach. And then Dr. Gotfryd went on to review some of the Sikha. Now, as a matter of fact, that Sikha is actually the foundation, the founding concept, or the founding principle of our Mashiach and Science organization. And that's exactly one of the things that were one of our two major themes that we investigate, besides the swords into plowshares, which is, okay, we spoke about before. The other thing is unifying theories in science, because of the three ways that science prepares the world, modern science now prepares the world for Yemos HaMashiach. Rabbi Menachem Shech explains it's because modern science shows the unity in nature in a way like never before, and that's a preparation for the revelation of the absolute unity of Hashem and Yemos HaMashiach. Specifically, Rabbi Melech HaMashiach refers to the fact that once upon a time, the philosophers and the scientists thought that everything in the world every material was different material. Every force was a different force with a different source. What modern science, starting in the 1800s, discovered is the number of physical elements that everything is made up from is a minimum, very small, relatively small number. And then even that is broken down to protons, neutrons, and electrons, which is only 3 different things, just organized differently and different quantities and different structures. And all the forces in the world, there are not many, many different forces. There are 4 fundamental forces: electromagnetic, gravity, weak force, weak nuclear force, and strong nuclear force. Okay,